So I was at this dinner a few weeks back, mostly policy analysts, national security folks, that kind of crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire conversation, I mean, seriously, the whole thing was just dominated by rare earths.
Oh, yeah, that's the hot topic.
Totally. And there was this one analyst, super sharp guy, holding court. He's practically drawing on the tablecloth, talking about China's grip, the supply chain.
The choke point narrative.
Exactly. It's the choke point. He kept saying, this is the leverage, you know, missiles, F-35s, EV batteries, all that stuff. To him, and pretty much everyone else there, this mineral thing was the story, like the beginning and end of the strategic threat.
Right. The immediate tangible vulnerability.
So then, mostly just to kind of poke the bear, I brought up Chancay.
Chancay.
Blank stare, complete blank stare. Chanwa, he asks. So I say, the new megaport in Peru, the one Costco's building.
And the reaction?
He just shrugged, almost laughed, actually. Said, that's logistics, that's just trade. Waved his hand like it was nothing. We're talking about the real stuff, the minerals. And then, boom, right back to his tablecloth diagram.
Wow.
And that moment, that instant dismissal, that's exactly what we need to dig into. Because while everyone's laser focused on the minerals, they are completely missing the map.
Yeah.
And China is building a brand new one right in, well, America's backyard.
And that right there, that anecdote, it perfectly captures why strategic thinking often gets it wrong in the 21st century.
How so?
Well, the analyst, he was looking at the bottleneck of material, the rare earths. And look, that's definitely a vital short-term choke point, no question.
Sure.
But the real game changer, the thing that causes those long-term, maybe irreversible shifts, that comes from controlling the bottleneck of position.
Okay, explain that distinction. Bottleneck of position.
Infrastructure, logistics, geography. This stuff isn't just trade like you waved it off. It's the actual architecture, the core plumbing of modern strategic leverage.
Right. Think about it. When you control the channels, the actual physical routes through which global stuff flows, you gain this structural influence that honestly no single commodity can match over the long haul. Because you're essentially controlling the pace, the very flow of global commerce itself.
That frames it perfectly. So, okay, our mission for this deep dive seems pretty clear then. We need to unpack this map, this overlooked map.
Exactly.
And we have to start with the biggest, newest pin that China's put on it in this hemisphere. The Chancay Megaport in Peru. It feels like the absolute centerpiece of this whole new architecture.
Let's start right there. Chancay is, well, it's the undeniable anchor. It's China's maritime Silk Road, really planting a flag in the Western Hemisphere, and it seems specifically designed to pull South America's trade gravity towards Asia.
Okay, let's get to the specifics. The sheer scale of this thing. Where exactly is it?
It's located about 70 to 80 kilometers north of Lima, the capital of Peru, up in the province of Huaral. And it's not just another port upgrade, right? It's massive, state-of-the-art. But the ownership, the investment, that's the real story here.
The investment numbers are just staggering. We're talking about a total projected cost of around $3.5 billion.
Wow.
Just the initial phase alone is $1.3 billion. And, to give you some perspective, that single investment, it dwarfs the combined investment in all the other 8 major ports in Peru.
That's incredible.
It's this overwhelming bet on one single location.
Yeah.
And the money is overwhelmingly coming from Chinese capital.
And even though it's technically a public-private partnership, the control is pretty clear-cut.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
China's state-owned giant Costco shipping ports, they hold a commanding 60% controlling stake.
Is 60%?
Yeah. And that's critical because it means Costco has the primary operational, the day-to-day management control. And crucially, this makes it the first port in the whole Western Hemisphere that's entirely under the control of this Chinese shipping giant.
That feels like a significant step up from what they usually do, right? Like minority stakes or just running a terminal here or there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a major strategic move compared to their other holdings, even some they have in North America.
And this didn't just happen overnight, but Costco getting involved really kicked things into high gear.
That's right. I mean, the idea for a new port at Chancay, it's been floating around since maybe 2008. Peru knew they needed to upgrade capacity.
Right.
But it only got this, let's say, strategic momentum back in 2019. That's when Costco swooped in and acquired that majority stake. They partnered with a Peruvian mining company, Vulcan, which holds the other 40%.
Okay.
And that move instantly signaled, this wasn't just going to be an upgrade. This is going to be a complete revolution in logistics capacity, specifically built around handling the absolute biggest ships out there.
And that revolution really comes down to size and efficiency, doesn't it? The scale allows it to act as a sort of bypass, So what makes Chancay unique compared to every other port on South America's Pacific coast?
It's all about the depth, the draft, and the berth size. Chancay is designed as the first true deep-water port on that whole coast, capable of handling what they call ultra-large container vessels, ULCVs.
Okay.
I'm talking the real giants of the sea here. Ships initially rated for up to 18,000 TEU. That's 20-foot equivalent units, the standard container size.
Right.
And eventually, the plan is to handle ships up to 24,000 TEU.
And this is where the Panama Canal comes in, because I think a lot of people just assume the canal can handle all the big ships now, especially after the expansion.
And that assumption, that's exactly what Chancay kind of undermines. Yes, the canal expansion created the Neo-Panamax class, handling maybe 14,000 TEU ships.
Okay.
But those really big ones, the post-Panamax ULCVs, the 18,000 to 24,000 TEU monsters that ply the main Asia-Europe routes, they physically cannot fit through the canal's locks. They're just too big.
So by building Chancay as the only place on that coast that can handle these behemoths,
They've immediately give Peru this sort of unparalleled strategic and commercial importance. It basically lets them leapfrog all the existing regional port infrastructure.
so it's not just bypassing the canal, it's bypassing the whole need for smaller ships to maybe go up to LA or somewhere else first. What does that actually mean in, like, dollars and days for a company shipping from, say, Shanghai?
The time and cost savings are, well, they're a genuine paradigm shift. Chancay establishes the first real direct shipping lane between Peru and China, specifically Shanghai.
And currently, how does that work?
Right now, that trip involves multiple stops, often transshipments in hubs like Mexico or Panama. It stretches the journey out to roughly 35 days.
Okay, over a month.
Yeah, Chancay aims to cut that down dramatically. The projection is transit times around 23 days.
Yeah, that's what, 10, 12 days saved?
Exactly. And that huge time cut is projected to slash overall logistics cost by over 20%. Now, if you're exporting something valuable or time-sensitive or perishable, that kind of reliability and speed is transformative.
And this is where the big numbers, the billions, start to translate into real-world impact, the aha moment for people on the ground. It's easy to lose sight of the local economy when we talk about these huge projects.
And that is absolutely the most crucial part of this story. We look at the big geopolitical map, right? But we often miss the human geography.
So let's make it real. Give us an example.
Okay, so imagine, let's call her Maria. She manages a small agricultural cooperative, maybe in the Joral Valley, just inland from where the port's being built.
Okay.
Her co-op, they specialize in premium avocados and blueberries, stuff that's really lucrative in those growing Asian markets.
Yeah, high demand.
For her whole career, though, shipping that stuff to China was just this huge existential risk.
What did that risk look like before Chancay? Walk us through it.
Okay, so before Chancay, her produce, her avocados had to be trucked for hours, often stuck in terrible traffic, south to the old port, Callao.
Yeah.
Which is notoriously congested, kind of dilapidated.
Yeah.
Just waiting for a berth there could add days to the trip. Then the sea voyage itself, with all the stops, lasted 40 days, maybe more.
40 days for avocados.
Exactly. Her profit margin was basically a function of how much spoiled. If the containers got held up just a few extra days somewhere in transit, she could easily lose 15, maybe 20% of her high-value product.
Yeah.
Every single shipment was this massive gamble. She'd have to overproduce, overship, just to try and hedge against those losses.
That sounds incredibly stressful. And now, with the direct route from Chancay.
Now, with Chancay, these new logistics partners, they're promising her direct access to, automated berths and this reliable 22-day route straight to Shanghai.
Huge difference.
Maria isn't thinking about Costco's 60% stake or geopolitics. She's calculating the difference between a 40-day gamble and a 22-day reliable delivery. That reduction in time, in spoilage risk, it fundamentally changes her whole business model. She can invest more confidently now, maybe hire 5 new people from her village because the harvest needs to be quicker. And she knows her community's hard work is actually going to reach the market fresh, get a better price. The Chinese investment here, for her, it's an unambiguous economic catalyst. It's creating a shorter, safer, more efficient path to prosperity for thousands of producers just like Maria.
That story really drives home why regional governments are often so welcoming of this kind of investment. The economic boost is immediate. And we're actually seeing it in the early trade data already, aren't we?
Oh, we are. Since that Chancay-Shanghai route officially kicked off in, what was it, December 2024, the total value of imports and exports between Shanghai and Peru shot up by an incredible 34.9% compared to the same period the year before.
35% jump almost instantly.
Yeah, it's a massive, immediate leap in trade activity. It just confirms the port's role as this major new gateway.
I'm curious, though, what makes up that big jump? Is it all just Peruvian stuff like minerals and avocados flowing out?
It's actually very reciprocal. It reflects a pretty balanced, deep economic relationship. Sure, Peruvian goods, minerals, agricultural products are definitely flowing out.
Right.
But we're seeing a significant flow of Chinese manufactured goods coming back in. For instance, customs data showed that Shanghai's port supervised the export of nearly 3,400 Chinese-made cars heading straight to Chancay in just the first half of 2025.
Wow, okay, so cars coming in too.
Yeah. The projection is that Chancay will handle something like 30% to 40% of Peru's total national cargo destined for Asia just in its first phase. And analysts in Shanghai, they already get it. They're calling Chancay a golden gateway that reaches way beyond Peru's coast, especially into those key economic zones like southeastern Brazil and northern Argentina.
That brings us nicely to the next level, the bigger picture. This port isn't just about Peru, is it? It's designed to be a continental hub, really reshaping how goods move across the entire southern cone of South America.
This is exactly where the geoeconomics move from, the tactical to the grand strategic. Chancay's vision goes way beyond Peru's borders. It's explicitly planned to be a transshipment point.
Meaning
Smaller feeder vessels coming from neighboring countries on the Pacific. Think Chile, Ecuador, Colombia can offload their cargo at Chancay.
Ah, okay. So instead of those countries sending their goods all the way up to, say, Los Angeles or trying to get through Panama,
Right.
they send a smaller ship up or down the coast to Chancay. Their cargo gets consolidated onto those huge ULCVs heading straight to Asia, so they get the efficiency benefits without having to build their own billion-dollar megaport.
Precisely. But the ambition is even bigger than just the Pacific coast. The ultimate goal. It involves transcontinental connections.
Across the Andes.
Yeah. There are plans underway to establish rail links, logistics connections that would reach eastward all the way into neighboring Brazil. The idea is to create a genuine transcontinental network linking the Pacific via Chancay with the Atlantic trade routes.
That sounds incredibly ambitious. Connecting the Amazon basin, Brazil's industrial heartland, directly to a Peruvian port for Asian trade. What's the stated goal here from the leaders involved?
Well, Peruvian President Dina Boluarte framed it as Chinese investment being an engine for sustainable development and progress for Peru and the region.
Okay.
But critically, Xi Jinping himself predicted that this project would consolidate Peru's status as a fundamental hub connecting all of Asia with Latin America and the Caribbean. This network basically provides a fast, reliable, large-scale alternative for exporting huge volumes of, say, Brazilian soybeans or iron ore that would otherwise face congestion or long distances on Atlantic routes. It's an explicit effort to shift the regional trade axis.
It really is a textbook example of a comprehensive geoeconomic strategy, using logistics to overcome huge physical barriers, historical problems, especially for those landlocked nations.
And this is where that strategy of connecting the resource extraction to the internal logistics and finally to the port access, where it becomes really visible and really transformative. It's about knitting together systems that were previously disconnected into one smooth, efficient corridor.
So to bring that comprehensive strategy to life again, let's think about the impact on a landlocked country like Bolivia. Getting access to the sea has always been this huge national economic challenge for them.
Let's consider the reality for someone, maybe Javier, a young logistics manager in La Paz. Maybe he specializes in mineral exports, lithium, tin, copper. Bolivia's got a lot of that.
Right.
For centuries, Bolivia being landlocked has just meant massive economic inefficiency, instability. Javier's life, professionally speaking, used to be defined by chaos. He'd have to juggle separate, often conflicting contracts just to get one shipment out the door.
Describe that pre-Chancay chaos for us. What did it look like?
Okay, the typical route. It involved expensive, unpredictable trucking across the Andes Mountains, then navigating complex, sometimes politicized, customs procedures at the Chilean border.
Right, potential delays there.
Big time. Then the goods had to compete for limited port slots in Chilean ports like Arica or Iquique, which were often congested anyway. Every single leg of that journey was its own separate bottleneck. He deflated costs, delayed payments. Javier was basically managing this inherently broken, disconnected system.
And how is this new strategy, the integrated corridor idea, changing things for Javier?
He's likely now working on proposals that aren't just about individual contracts, but about the whole corridor. These are plans, often financed at least partly by Chinese or Chinese-linked companies, that integrate the mine, maybe new dedicated rail lines, and the Port Chancay into one efficient chain.
New rail lines specifically for this.
Yeah, new rail lines are being seriously considered specifically to handle Bolivian commodities and link them directly to these upgraded facilities in Peru. So for Javier, this means predictable throughput, lower costs, increased capacity, and for Bolivia as a nation, this strategy offers this previously unattainable dream of predictable prosperity, direct, efficient flow for their commodities. It's literally infrastructure solving a geographic problem.
That's genuinely remarkable. By integrating the whole chain mine, rail, automated Port China offers landlocked nations a solution they just couldn't get before.
Yeah.
It effectively ties them into this new logistical ecosystem with a really strong economic incentive.
And that new ecosystem, it's also about diversification. It promotes what analysts are calling South-South economic cooperation.
Meaning?
Basically, it allows companies in Latin America and the Caribbean to strategically bypass the traditional gatekeepers, North American and European ports and trade routes that have dominated global commerce for decades.
Give us another concrete example of how that diversification plays out, maybe for a manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere, shifting their focus.
Okay, let's think about Luis. He owns a medium-sized factory down in São Paulo, Brazil. His company makes these high-tech, sustainable packaging materials from sugarcane fiber. That's a really cutting-edge product.
Okay, sounds interesting.
For 10 years, Luis's market was pretty much geographically restricted. He focused on North America and Europe simply because shipping to Asia was just prohibitively expensive, took forever, and was incredibly complex. Goods often had to travel north to the U.S. or maybe through the Mediterranean before they even headed east. It added massive cost and risk.
That must have been a huge barrier to entry in Asia, which is, the fastest growing market.
Absolutely. But in the last, say, 3 years, Luis has watched these new direct shipping lines pop up, connecting deep Brazilian ports like Santos directly to major Asian hubs, Singapore, Shanghai. The difference in cost and time was so significant that he was actually able to win his first major supply contract with a big cosmetics company over in Malaysia.
From Brazil to Malaysia direct.
Exactly. His sustainable packaging now travels east, directly into the Asian market, leveraging the better frequency and speed of these new routes. He's even starting R&D collaborations with a university in Vietnam now.
Wow.
This is South-South cooperation in action. It's Luis in Brazil, finding a partner in Malaysia, bypassing the old gatekeepers, and fundamentally diversifying his global supply chain one container at a time.
So Chancay's obviously huge, but it's clearly part of a much bigger pattern. This broad geographic footprint of China's port influence across the whole hemisphere, it shows this is a coordinated continental strategy, not just some isolated investment.
That is the absolute critical realization. This is a map that's being methodically, deliberately built. Chinese companies are investors, or their administrators, in at least 37, maybe as many as 40, ports right across Latin America and the Caribbean.
40 ports! That's a lot.
It is. And if you just count the deep-water ports in the region, China controls roughly 1/3 of them. This extensive network, it really reflects a truly coordinated long-term strategy.
Where are the most strategically important ones, besides Peru?
Brazil actually has the largest number of individual sites, with 11 ports showing Chinese investment or administration. That includes the huge deep-water port of Paranoia, where China Merchants Port Holdings snapped up a 90% controlling stake for nearly $1 billion.
90%. Wow. And Mexico.
Mexico's crucial, too. Chinese interests are involved in 4 ports there, notably Manzanillo, that's the country's most important maritime facility, and also Lázaro Cárdenas.
But I have to jump in here. The proximity to the biggest choke point of them all, the Panama Canal, that has to be significant.
Excellent point. The strategic positioning around the canal itself is absolutely paramount. You have Chinese-linked entities operating ports like Balboa on the Pacific side and Colón on the Atlantic side. They effectively control key access points surrounding that vital waterway.
Right.
And Jamaica's in the mix, too, with strategic Chinese-operated port access in Kingston. The goal seems pretty clear. control the points of entry, and exit across the entire continental trade architecture.
Okay, so this huge continental scale presence definitely moves us beyond just commercial investment. We're firmly in the realm of geoeconomic strategy now. Let's talk about the strategic intent behind all this, starting with the most obvious goal: resources.
Resource security is absolutely the foundation of this network. The ports are central to guaranteeing China constant, direct access to those critical raw materials that are essential for its industries, especially with the global push towards clean energy.
And Latin America is just loaded with this stuff.
Uniquely endowed, you've got Chile and Peru, top global copper producers, and then the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, holding roughly half the world's estimated lithium resources.
And China is the #1 customer and a key investor in getting these materials out of the ground.
Precisely. China is the primary market, buying up like 34% of the region's mineral exports last year. Since 2018 alone, they've invested something like $11 billion just in lithium extraction.
Okay.
So by securing the logistics, by owning or administering the channels through which all this copper and lithium flows, China guarantees not just its control over refining and processing back home, but the reliable transport of the raw materials directly back to its industries. The logistical leverage reinforces the material leverage. It's synergistic.
And this access, it's built on decades of just sustained economic engagement leading to dominance in the region. That 35-fold trade growth since 2000, that number is just mind-boggling.
The numbers really confirm this massive shift in economic gravity. Trade between China and Latin America Caribbean, it exploded from like $12 billion in 2000 to over $450 billion in 2023.
Incredible growth.
I mean, if you told analysts 20 years ago that China would blow past the U.S. to become South America's top trading partner, they probably would have laughed. But that's the reality now. And beyond trade, the LAC region is now the second biggest global destination for Chinese foreign direct investment, only behind Asia itself. This economic reality, it inevitably generates profound political and diplomatic leverage too.
But this overwhelming success, this massive presence, that's precisely what's causing friction, right? Major strategic concern back in Washington and in European capitals too. Some analysts are using pretty strong language, calling this port network a reverse first island chain.
It's a compelling analogy, definitely controversial though.
Yeah.
The idea is that China's building up strategic leverage, this dense web of economic dependencies, obligations right here in the Western Hemisphere.
Okay.
And comparing it to the first island chain, that ring of U.S. military bases in the Western Pacific meant to contain China, it's meant to highlight that the strategy is about positional dominance.
Hang on, I have to push back a bit on that term. Are we really equating a commercial shipping port, even a big one, with a string of military bases? How exactly does the supply chain project the same kind of leverage as, say, a battleship?
That's exactly the right question. The leverage isn't projected through, like, cannons and missiles. It's projected through economic dependency.
How?
A port that controls the flow of goods. It can impose massive economic costs just as effectively, maybe more subtly, than a battleship controlling sea lanes. The leverage comes from the potential ability to impose penalties.
For example?
Well, imagine if a country in the region tries to align too closely with the U.S. on a sensitive issue. Beijing could, theoretically, use its control over logistics, tweaking shipping schedules, maybe financing terms, trade quotas to apply severe economic pressure, threatening jobs, local economies that have now become completely reliant on this efficient China-backed network. The infrastructure itself becomes the potential tool for political coercion, designed to project dependency and maybe ensure regional compliance.
Okay, that explanation makes the leverage clearer. And this brings us right to the most sensitive part of the whole debate: the potential for dual use. Experts like at CSIS and some U.S. officials, they keep raising red flags about the military potential of ports like Chancay.
Yeah, this is a major point of contention. The primary fear really centers on the technical specs. Analysts point out correctly that Chancay's deep-water berths are, by design, wide enough and deep enough to accommodate large Chinese Navy, PLA Navy, vessels.
Right.
And this leads directly to those dual-use fears. The concern is that these deep-water ports, controlled by state-owned enterprises with deep ties back to Beijing, might be put at the disposal of the Chinese state, particularly during some kind of major crisis, maybe a conflict over Taiwan, for example.
Okay, putting aside the, maybe low probability of outright military use, there are more immediate concerns too, right? Like intelligence gathering, commercial surveillance?
Absolutely. Controlling the ports and controlling the vast amounts of maritime logistics data that flow through them, that's a significant intelligence concern in itself.
How so?
Well, it potentially facilitates privileged intelligence collection on U.S. and allied naval movements just transiting the region. And beyond military stuff, having that detailed real-time access to the flow of global commerce, knowing who's shipping what, where, when that gives a massive commercial intelligence advantage, potentially that could be used to undercut U.S. or other allied businesses competing in Latin America.
And then there are these troubling allegations linking port control to security issues, specifically organized crime, trafficking, things that have reportedly happened at other Chinese-influenced ports.
Yes, that's another serious concern raised by some sources. The worry is that Chinese control or even just significant influence over customs and security protocols of these facilities could maybe inadvertently or perhaps deliberately facilitate illicit activities.
Are there specific examples?
Well, reports, specifically mentioning ports like Lázaro Cárdenas and Manzanillo in Mexico, have pointed to instances where organized crime allegedly exploited those facilities. There's data cited from Mexican agencies about seizures of millions of doses of fentanyl precursors reportedly trafficked through those ports between, say, 2015 and 2023.
Right.
And analysts looking at that pattern suggest, hypothetically, that similar vulnerabilities could apply to new facilities like Chancay. It definitely raises serious questions about security integrity across this growing network.
Okay, so we have these significant strategic concerns laid out, potential military utility, intelligence gathering, possible links to organized crime facilitation. But look, we need to be impartial here, present the whole picture. The sources we've looked at also stress that many critics see this level of alarm as, frankly, exaggerated paranoia. Let's explore that counter perspective.
And that pushback is definitely strong. And it's crucial for getting a balanced view. Analysts who emphasize the economic drivers argue that the critics are basing their conclusions mostly on, quote, hypothetical threat scenarios and vague assertions, rather than on concrete proof.
Right.
One prominent analyst, Zijin Wang, explicitly called the heightened criticism paranoia about China's growing trade relationships, saying ports were being labeled high risk just because of where they are geographically, close to the U.S.
So if the economic reality of the business case is the main driver, then the argument against dual use looks different. Chinese port operators, even the state-owned ones like Costco, they're ultimately competing in a global market, right? They need to be profitable.
That's the core counter-argument.
Yeah.
These port operators, Costco included, they operate in a fiercely competitive global shipping and logistics market. Their primary goal is likely maximizing returns for their shareholders, maximizing throughput efficiency. Their participation is probably rooted more in competitive dynamics, offering better technology, huge amounts of capital, more automation, rather than some secret plot to gain military footholds or selectively cut off supply lines based on whatever Beijing wants strategically that day. The efficiency they bring is a real, undeniable competitive advantage in the commercial sphere.
And we absolutely have to highlight the sovereignty check here. What prevents a foreign power from just unilaterally using a port in, say, Peru for military purposes? Are there local rules?
This is a critical point that often gets minimized by those focused only on the threat narrative. Peruvian law and the local regulations for Chancay are apparently very clear. Any entry into the port for non-commercial reasons like military use requires the express formal approval of both the Peruvian Congress and the executive power.
So multiple layers of local government approval needed.
Exactly. That robust regulatory structure really contradicts the fear that some foreign entity could just flip a switch and turn the port into a naval base whenever they want. Local sovereignty and these legal mechanisms act as a pretty significant check on those worst-case strategic scenarios.
So while the strategic concerns about potential influence, intelligence gathering, maybe economic leverage, those are valid topics for discussion, for monitoring.
Sure.
The idea that China can just sort of seize these assets for military use seems to fly in the face of the local sovereignty and the regulatory checks that the Peruvian government itself has put in place.
Exactly. We have to acknowledge the potential for increased economic dependence, definitely. But it's vital to make sure the analysis is grounded in the economic realities and the actual local legal frameworks, not just jumping to speculative military threats. Because ultimately, the local governments, they're the ones making the decisions based on their national interests.
Okay, let's pivot now to the environment that kind of allowed China to gain this much ground so quickly. It seems pretty clear that China's huge advance was largely possible because of what some call strategic neglect from traditional Western partners, mainly the U.S. and the EU.
This strategic vacuum, you could argue, is probably the single biggest reason for China's success in the region. For decades, traditional partners just sort of overlooked Latin America. They didn't offer competitive infrastructure alternatives, sometimes didn't even maintain consistent high-level diplomatic engagement.
And their market share suffered.
Absolutely, declined precipitously as a direct result. Just look at the trade numbers. Between 2007 and 2023, the EU's share of total Latin American trade actually declined by 2 percentage points. Meanwhile, China's share increased by a massive 9.6 percentage points.
Wow, that's a stark contrast.
The shift in economic gravity wasn't really contested. You could say it was almost ceded.
And the EU specifically has faced criticism for being, well, diplomatically absent or inattentive at times. What were some of those specific diplomatic misses that might have created an opening for China?
The failures were kind of both symbolic and substantive. Symbolically, the EU didn't even hold a high-level summit with the region for over 8 years, between 2015 and 2023.
8 years is a long gap.
It sends a clear signal, right, of strategic disinterest. And then substantively, during the really critical early phase of the COVID pandemic, the EU was seen as slow with vaccine diplomacy. That damaged credibility while China and Russia, too, actually, were early and very visible suppliers in the region.
Okay.
Plus, some of the EU's Green Deal policies, like the deforestation regulation, have been perceived, rightly or wrongly, by big agricultural exporters like Argentina and Brazil as being protectionist. That strained relationships further and made China's offer big capital with seemingly fewer political strings attached look much more appealing.
So, you leave the strategic vacuum wide open. China's standing there with billions in cash and a very efficient plan for ports and logistics. They're going to fill that vacuum, and fast.
The Chinese proposition, fast, massive, capital-intensive infrastructure, often with a stated emphasis on local economic benefits, it became the best offer, partly because, for a long time, it was often the only coherent large-scale offer on the table.
Right.
So China has cemented its place. It's Latin America's #2 trade partner overall, bigger than the EU now, and still South America's undisputed top trading partner. The West is definitely playing catch-up at this point, much more reactive.
So what does that competitive response look like now that the map's been significantly redrawn? The US and EU are scrambling, trying to boost engagement, offer alternatives. Moving towards strategies to, insulate, curtail, compete?
It seems to be a multi-pronged approach, focusing a lot on standards and financing alternatives. The EU, for example, is now pushing its Global Gateway initiative much more aggressively. They're explicitly aiming to mobilize something like $45 billion for Latin America and the Caribbean by 2027.
Okay, that's a big number.
And the focus is on promoting high-quality, transparent infrastructure standards. It's positioned as a deliberate contrast to, the speed and sometimes the debt concerns associated with some built-in road projects.
And on the U.S. side, what are their main efforts?
The U.S. is promoting initiatives like the Americas Act, pushing the Blue Dot Network, which is basically a certification system for infrastructure projects based on high environmental, social, and labor standards.
Right.
The goal seems to be giving regional governments viable, transparent alternatives to Chinese-backed projects, forcing local leaders to weigh, immediate low-cost investment versus maybe long-term quality, sustainability, and, frankly, geopolitical alignment.
But this competition gets really complicated, doesn't it? Especially since many countries in the region, particularly the big economies, they really want non-alignment. They don't want to be forced to choose sides. Brazil seems like the perfect case study of this strategic tightrope walk.
Brazil is absolutely pivotal here. It's the region's largest economy, the only Latin American member of BRICS, making it a key partner for China.
Yeah.
And despite navigating intense domestic politics and this constant need to balance relations with the U.S., Brazil clearly recognized the practical relevance of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Even though they haven't formally signed on to the BRI itself.
Exactly. They notably declined to formally join the BRI at the recent G20 summit. That move really highlights their desire for strategic autonomy, for flexibility.
Yet their actual cooperation with China is incredibly deep and seems to be accelerating.
It's profound. They recently elevated their strategic partnership, signed something like 40 separate agreements. And this is accelerating cooperation in really sensitive areas, like space exploration. You've got Chinese commercial space companies now set to launch satellites from Brazil's Alcantara space station.
Wow, okay.
This just demonstrates China's success in securing deep long-term cooperation, deep infrastructure integration, regardless of whether a country puts its name on the dotted line of a big, high-profile initiative like the BRI. China's approach shows that the relationship gets defined by this continuous, deep investment that fundamentally reshapes the economic reality on the ground, making that new map feel increasingly permanent. So we try to synthesize everything we've dug into here. The dominant global conversation, the one about rare earths, that focuses on a critical materials bottleneck. It's tangible, it's a short-term choke point, vital for high-tech manufacturing.
Right, the minerals.
So the map that's being actively redrawn in Latin America, symbolized by Chancay, but really represented by that whole network of 40 ports, that's about a positional bottleneck.
Materials versus position.
Exactly. And these two forms of leverage, they're actually mutually reinforcing.
Yeah.
Controlling the logistical flow through these automated ports. It strengthens the long-term strategic position of whoever controls the materials themselves. This active, ongoing construction of a new map is fundamentally restructuring the hemisphere. It's shifting the center of trade gravity towards the Pacific, towards Asia, potentially for the next century of global trade. It's not assumed anymore, it's being built.
And maybe this is the final thought we should leave everyone with. While those immediate economic benefits, shorter transit times, lower costs, while those are undeniably transforming lives and local economies right now, think back to Maria the avocado farmer or Luce the packaging guy.
Yeah, the tangible benefits.
The cumulative effect, the long-term impact of controlling the actual channels through which global trade flows, that's the true source of deep strategic power here. The sheer volume of containers moving, the control over all that crucial maritime logistics data, the integrated network of infrastructure. It means the minerals might be the urgent story today, but the ports, the map itself, that's going to be the profound structural story shaping the next century. This new reality really demands that we stop thinking about logistics as just, boring trade and really recognize it for what it is, fundamental geopolitical power.